So I'm gonna apologize in advance. I live with two other humans and a dog, and so I'm gonna do my best to stay focused on this, but we'll see how that goes. I didn't want to do this in my studio because it's so dark in there, and you guys have seen it already. So my name is Mariella, and I have lived in Olympia for almost 25 years. Um, Before I moved to Olympia, I lived in the Washington D.C. area, and where it's a really big place for the like DIY punk scene, and especially the all ages scene. And one of the reasons why is that in that area, you can have music shows that don't where you don't have to be 18 or 21 to get in. And that was a really, and I sort of say all this because I think that that was a very formative time in my life. I am sort of a what might be considered a lifelong punk. I went to shows when I was really young, and and I was able to do that because of the area that I lived in. And DC is a really political area, as one can imagine. And so the music scene in the 80s was, for me, sort of my saving grace. I wasn't and I'm not particularly athletic. Or popular when I was in school. So music and going to shows was something that was really important to me growing up. So fast forward some years, and then I moved to Olympia in 1995, and that was something that sort of made me fall in love with Olympia from the very beginning. When I first moved here, there was a lot of shows at the Capitol Theater backstage and other places where people were having all ages. And when I moved here, I still wasn't 21. So I was able to participate in the scene here almost right away. I think within the first couple of months from when I moved here, Fugazi, which is a very well-known punk band from DC, played at the Capitol Theater, and I was like, oh, this is where I belong. So the all ages movement is really about the ability for people of all ages, primarily teens, to be able to access music and play for each other and participate in a community that doesn't involve bars and drinking. And that might not sound like a very revolutionary or exciting idea, but I think for lots of people, if you're not going to go to the Friday night football game or want to hang out at your local gas station, then the thing that's going to be of interest to you is to participate in your local art and music scene. After I graduated from college, I got a job working for a record label, a local record called K Records. And even though K is sometimes not thought of as a punk label because its music doesn't sound like what people think punk music sounds like, philosophically and ethically, I think it's so punk. One of the things that I have come away with from knowing Calvin and working with him over many years was how important our actions reflect our ethics. And he is a person that really lives by that every day, does so many things that the things that he does, where he spends his money, how he talks, how he thinks, really is reflective of his values. And that's something that I really aspire to. And so that he's a Calvin Johnson. He's a local artist and musician. And when I first met him, he was probably in his mid to late 30s. Obviously not someone that really needs to go to all ages shows. But even now, 20 years later, he only plays all ages shows. He only plays shows that everyone can go to. And a lot of the bands that were on K are on K and have released records on the label over the years only play all ages shows. And that's just, I think, part of the philosophy of participating in music is to want to be inclusive and to not make it about bars making money or these big venues where it excludes a certain kind of people. So back in 2008, over the years, there's been a lot of all ages venues in Olympia, and as unremarkable as it might seem, they're actually they're really hard to fund. They're really hard to find. They're really hard to fund, and so because they don't make money from selling drinks, so most of the time they're like projects that are really built out of love, I guess is the best way to say it. And so back in the early aughts, over the years we've had lots of different all ages venues. There was the Midnight Sun, which actually just closed. There was a Aerospace, which was above the Dumpster Values over on Washington. There was Yes Yes, which was on 4th Avenue. And then back in around 2007, 2006, there was a space also on 4th called the Black Lodge. And so we've had all these like rotating, all ages venues in Olympia throughout the years. And in 2008, someone who apparently just joined, one of my best friends, Dirk, and I were at a show at the Black Lodge, and I think they were about to close. And the person who had the lease on that space, his name was Jason, just couldn't afford to do it anymore. And so Kelsey, we're ready for the slideshow. So at that time, I had been putting on a few shows in town, and it was really expensive. Like I had put on a show for our friend Kimia Dawson at the Eagles Hall, and I had become an Eagles member, which cost me $50. And then I had to rent a PA, and I had to like rent the venue, and then set it all up. And I had a car, and I was a grown up, and it cost me like $800. And I made my money back, and it wasn't a big deal. But then I realized like how difficult it was for other people to put on shows. After the Black Lodge closed, there wasn't a place where people could gather for music and participate in this scene without this like really large monetary barrier. A lot of people don't have $700 just so that they can cross their fingers that their friend's going to make that back at a show. So at the time, Dirk and I decided that we were going to try to have an all ages venue, and which sort of seemed ridiculous at the time. Putting on shows all around town for a minute, maybe 6 months or a year. We did the Eagles Club, the Knitting Mills, which wasn't the Knitting Mills or wasn't referred to as the Knitting Mills then, in this room called the Big Room. We used to put on shows there. And then we found the space that you're looking at right now, which was at 321 4th Avenue, which was a jewelry store prior to our inhabiting it. And our friend Kimia actually gave us the money to put down the deposit on this space and our first 3 months worth of rent. So the landlord let us, there used to be all these built-in cabinets, and we pulled them all out, and we built all the walls and installed all the lighting, took out this really gnarly carpeting, and started having shows. There was a giant, you can't see it, but there was a giant hole in the ceiling in the back. And we were really never able to cover that up.
Sometimes things would come out of it.
Yeah. So we were in this space for about a year, and then the building got sold to a developer who has since turned into, who actually didn't really do much with this current space. It's the Olympia Olive Oil Company now. And then next door, where we had some studio spaces that we were renting, they turned that into an apartments, and it's now a bike shop. But one of the other things that we wanted to do with Northern was to have art shows. And this is something that I think doesn't, I mean, I think it's hard in every community, but at the time in Olympia, it was really challenging for people, for younger people to show artwork. There were like a couple coffee shops, but primarily, you know, the art that was available was in stores, like Childhood's End Gallery, and a lot of our friends at the time, like even now, their work isn't really appropriate for those sorts of venues. It's a little bit more edgy, and they maybe wouldn't be framed right, or maybe it wouldn't be like gallery appropriate. And so in addition to having shows, we also had, like music shows, we also had a lot of art shows. And so as you can see, this is like, it's actually 2 installations. The one on the back wall is was done by Jean Nagai. And then the other one, I think, was curated by Scott Young and Casey Jones. And so we had a lot of artists that would like work directly on the walls. You can see some framed work, you can see some installation, you can see some fabric. And there was just a real variety of work that we could show there that was unlike any other place in town. And for the most part with Northern, it was all privately funded. We never got any grants. Even though we were a nonprofit, we were 100% we were 100% volunteer run. And so all of the work that came from these projects was done for free. So all these people, like when I told you that we ripped out the cabinets, we did that ourselves. We had our friends come, we did dump runs, we painted ourselves, like all of the sound panels on the top were made by our friends. And so it was really a labor of love, you know. It's like a thing that people wanted to do for our community, not because none of us ever made any money off of it. And we ran from 2008 to 2015. So after we moved out of this space, we moved into another space. I think also, this might be our friend Genevieve. We moved into a space over on Legion. And
this is moving out of the old space. So you can see things are starting to get packed up. And Judith Bauman was the gallery curator, I think, most of the time, all of the time. Yeah, these are pictures from her blog at the end of getting stuff out of there.
One of the reasons why why Dirk and I felt like it was important to have an all ages venue, and some people might wonder why that's necessary. I think that Olympia has a really long and strong culture of house shows, which is great. It's amazing. But a lot of people don't actually feel that comfortable going to house shows for a multitude of reasons. Sometimes, you know, when we first started, one of the places that was having a lot of house shows was this place called the ABC House, which is on the west side. And it's a beautiful venue, and it's in this old house. But to get to the show, you have to go around the back and down a set of stairs. And normally the shows are really quiet. And so if you showed up to the address that was on the flyer, you'd walk up, and if you went to the front door, no one would answer. You'd have to know to go around to the back and down the stairs where there's probably nobody standing. So you're just like creeping around somebody's backyard in the middle of the night, hoping that you're gonna like run into your friends. And that's, I think, the case with lots of places that have house shows. The guest house was similar. They were in the basement. And we just felt like that was a real barrier to people seeing and experiencing music. So there was
also not handicapped accessible.
And not handicap accessible. That was something that was very important to us in both of the venues that we had, that they were accessible for all. So even, in this photo, you can see that there's a door with a step, but there was also another door around the back where people could come in if they needed better accessibility. So even though house shows continue to happen, and I hope that they will thrive for a long time, we wanted it to be more accessible. I think also at the time when we started, a lot of our friends had a much younger audience, and I would sort of joke that like I didn't think any teens, like any 14-year-old's mom was going to be super stoked to drop them off at some random house on the west side to go to a show. So at least if they were at a venue, they could get dropped off, and their moms or their dads or their guardians could see like this is the real place where there are other people, and I can see and I can go in and I can check it out. And that also sort of made it more legitimate.
And they could volunteer too.
And they could volunteer. We in the beginning, we worked with a lot of high school kids to put on shows monthly. And, it was great because it enabled us to have an audience that we wouldn't normally reach. So we were able to work to really truly be an all ages venue. When we moved into this venue, it's a little bit of a point of pride for me that my nephew finally thought I was cool, and he had a band and they played the opening show at this spot, and then he booked a bunch of shows in our second location, which was really nice. So yeah, maybe
Go to the next slide.
Yeah, maybe I'll stop talking and let Kelsey roll through these awesome slides that we have, and I'll just comment. Oh, that's my kid.
That was our sandwich board that was always kind of on the verge of falling apart. But we used it, I think, the whole time. And this is the space on Legion after we opened. The picture too before that was as we were working on the space. So before, after. Lots of white paint.
Yeah. We got really good at painting.
Yeah. Okay. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, this is Arrington Dionyso. He is a local artist and musician. He actually had a number of shows in both of the galleries. One of the things that I think Arrington excels at, one of the many things, is his ability to work in a bunch of different mediums. He had a show in our original space that was actually one of my favorite, where he drew directly on the walls. It was kind of a pain to clean up afterwards, but it was great to be able to have the opportunity for people to see his work on a large scale. This is a show that he's making while it's in progress. So you can see that he's doing, I think he does sumi on just paper, and he does a whole variety of different kinds of work. So he makes beautiful.
I think 24 hours, right?
Oh yeah, maybe it was a 24-hour performance.
He did this for 24 hours straight. So
he's also plays in band.
I already got that one. I guess I got that one twice. That's Wild Flag at the old space.
Yeah.
One of the sold out shows. So this is two of the members of Sleater Kinney and Mary Timony. Who else? I can't remember.
I can't remember the fourth person either.
Here's some of the murals. You could talk about those.
So the building was a really unattractive cinder block building. We got our landlord to pay just this one artist. We actually had 3 murals on the building, but this was the only one that was actually paid for by the landlord. And this one was done by Jean Negay. And it's sadly it's been painted over. It was just, I don't really know what to say about it. Jean is well known for having very intricate art. So as you get closer, you can see how much detail is in it. So one of my favorite things to do is just sort of walk up to it and stare at it, because you could see all these like crazy quirky things on it. It's not in this section, but I think you can just, yeah, it's wildly detailed.
I love this mural. I got a couple other mural pictures in here too.
This one was done by Reed Urban. It's actually just a black square with lots of dots. We had originally hoped to have it multicolored, but the black on gold just sort of worked out the best. So it's a really subtle one, which is,
I think there's a close-up.
yeah. And then this one that was done by China Star.
I love this one too.
Is this one still there?
I don't think so. That's it for the slides.
Yeah, so I guess I talked way more than I should. I'm hoping that you guys have some questions, or maybe not, and maybe Kelsey, and I don't know if Dirk's actually still on here, if anyone has anything that they would like to chime in. Maybe I'll quickly say that this project sort of ties in with a project or some other work that has been happening in the city, which when we were in our first location and in our second location, we provided art studio space for people. And I think that that's a need. Not only do we need, I think every community needs, but a space for artists to perform, which is a low cost barrier. So when we were in our first space, we would take a percentage of the door. And so artists never had to pay to have a show, either an art show or a music show. And then when we built a relationship with the landlord, we were renting studio spaces next door to us, and also at a low cost. And, you know, a lot of people in our community need space to like make work, to have practice space, to have art space, which is really hard to come by affordably, or it's actually just hard to come by, period. And one of the reasons why we're having this talk is because Kelsey, who currently runs Community Print, was one of our tenants in the second space that we were at. So
a short time.
Unfortunately, we got kicked out of our second space, and it seemed like Obsidian had just opened, and they were sort of available to have all ages shows, and Stable Gallery had also just opened, and they were able to have art shows. So the need for having a DIY space that was all volunteer run seemed not necessary, or as necessary as it had once been. So yeah, that was, yeah. Rhett is posting lessons learned. If I have a lesson learned, it's that work is never done. I mean, we stopped doing Northern in 2015, and then a few years ago was the Ghost Ship fire, and that just reminds me that like safe spaces for music and art are always going to be necessary. Yes. And we can have house shows, and we can have these sort of underground spaces, and I think that those are important to creativity. But I also think that like just having an outlet for people who don't have the resources. I think lots of people that are on these calls, who I admire, a lot of you, we're all sheltered. We all have homes. We all have studio space. Many of us have studio spaces within our own homes. We have resources. And that was one thing that we found for a lot of the people that we worked with in the Northern communities, they didn't. These are people who are lacking funds and resources, but still have that creative drive. And it's really important to support that.
I really miss having, there's not a lot of spaces right now in Olympia where you can have all ages shows. Obsidian opened, and that was one of their plans, was to have more all ages shows. And then there was a barrier because of the fact that they sold liquor. If they had anyone drinking, they could be fined. So they kind of stopped having all ages shows, and then they closed. And I just feel like there's a real loss right now. I feel like it really made a difference in our community, and I miss that time where we had access to that.
Yeah, I should say that, like, it's I mean, you guys can see that I'm not white, but I don't I really dislike the idea of the white knight, of the person that kind of comes in and swoops in and like solves a problem. When we started doing Northern, it was part of it was like to lean on the skills that we had to create a community space that we felt was needed in our community, not just because we felt like it should happen, but because it was something that we also wanted. It was the art and work that we wanted to see. So it was like partly, at least to a certain extent, a little bit selfish, to create a place that we wanted to be at, which wasn't necessarily like, it wasn't for everyone. There was still lots of, there is always lots of criticism from many different angles. So you just sort of have to keep going with whatever you are doing, and ignore all that bullshit. But I think now we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and I think that when we're at some point, we'll be ready for that kind of space again. I think that we're seeing now more than ever the socioeconomic disparity within our communities and within our culture. And so I don't think that at the end of this, we're going to have a lot more resources. I think we're really seeing how people have a lot less resources and a lot less opportunity to participate in this like art culture. And so maybe we all as a city, we need to think about how we want our future to look like, what we want that future to look like, and what we're going to do to make it happen again. At least for me.
It improves our city so much to have things like Northern in it, and to have access to that. Like, I think about all of the audio folks that got trained at Northern and learned how to do audio recording and engineering. And I see a couple of them here, actually. I see Elizabeth. And they all, do that for a living now. So, I mean, the impact on this community was very great, I think. And Lynette wants to know if you hope to do it again, Mariella. It was a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. The answer is maybe. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Dirk, you go.
Sorry. I'm gonna just like not turn on my video.
I want to see your face though.
Okay, fine. Hello,
hi.
basement in Philadelphia. I was thinking, Mars responsive to would you want to do it again? It's a lot of work. When I think back on it, I think it's just phenomenal to me, like how much we worked. It was a crazy amount of labor, 7 days a week. all the time. And it was a lot of our labor. And then, you know, I just like think about moving PAs around at 3 a.m. or whatever, and then getting up the next day and doing it again. It was a lot of our labor, but we also asked a lot of our volunteers and the people that were working really intimately with us, of our sound people, of everybody that was working with us. We asked a lot of them. And I think Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but like it was sort of hard to like avoid burnout on our part and for the people that worked with us. And I think that if I could go back and do it again, I would be a lot more keyed into how can we make this sustainable, not just in like financial terms, but in terms of a sustainable project for the people that we're working with. How can we make it so that that the people that we're working with are getting a lot out of the experience and also not just being like, I don't know, run into the ground the same way that we were, you know? And I think that part of the like punk ethos has always been sort of this emphasis on community and this emphasis on care. And I think that, at least for me, speaking from a personal perspective, I think at times when you were just trying to make the project survive, it was easy to sort of like lose sight of like taking care of the people that we were working with and not asking so much of ourselves and our friends. Like I wish I could have like taken care of people a little bit better in that respect.
Yeah, I remember lots of shows where like people, you know, the volunteers wouldn't show up and then they'd call Mariella or they'd call Sam,
Right.
who did
Yeah.
lots of sound and like, you know,
Yeah.
over and over and over again. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I think it is one of the funny things that is, I mean, it's called DIY, which is do it yourself. So even though it's like, in theory, a community project, lots of us would just, I mean, when someone else doesn't show up, who goes? You go. And so I think that originally we had hoped that it would be a model based on like our friend Shannon up in Seattle was one of the founders of the VARE project. And that we'd hoped that it would be a model where we would be able to get more volunteers to participate. And we did over time. But when you're trying to sustain a long-term project, I think, like I said, this was over about 7 or 8 years. It's hard to find someone who wants to volunteer regularly for 8 years. Lynette, you had a question.
Yeah, hi. This is fantastic, and I used to go to the Fishtail pub, and I had no idea that this was going on next door. And I just wanted to say that this kind of thing is really, really important for kids who are so lonely sometimes, and they sit at home, and they don't have anywhere to go, and their friends are unavailable. And I just think that what a wonderful thing you were doing. And I also wondered, like, because I know personally when you start a project, it is to be. And I remember we were starting up a school in Los Angeles, and we used to have these days of action. So we'd call on everyone just for one day to do, you know, you'd call on the whole bunch of people for one day to do like 4 hours work. And, you know, 3 or 4 hours out of everyone's weekend isn't a huge thing to ask. And when you amount it with the amount of people, that's a lot of hours put in. And I was wondering if, you know, if you do this again, could you reach out to the schools or the YMCA or the YWCA or, you know, different organizations in Olympia, and maybe just have a day of action so that instead of a small amount of people doing the mountain share, maybe with that kind of outreach, you kind of publicize what you're doing at the same time. I'm gonna go off now.
I mean, yes, absolutely. In the future, it would be great to be able to have more community participation. I think one of the things that I sort of left out, which was sort of a big element was that these kinds of venues are not city supported. They actually don't want to have them in the community. So they perceive it to be a, what's the best word for it?
Nuisance?
Liability.
Yes, a liability, a safety liability that we're potentially putting people at harm in these situations. And so one of the primary reasons that so many of all ages venues have closed over the years is because the city uses code enforcement to make it very difficult for them to survive in the long term. And one of the instances that they cite as the cause for this is, I'm sure some of you have heard that, like, way back, maybe 15 years ago, there was this like rock band, this rock show where they had all these pyrotechnics in a venue that couldn't handle it, and then they ended up they burned down the venue and a lot of people died, and I mean, which is terrible. But I promise that, like, in this like weird storefront in downtown Olympia, there were no fireworks, there were no pyrotechnics, there was no open flames. We very rarely even allow like smoke machines. So great white, thank you, Rhett.
Yes.
So, but since then they have said that, like, oh well, this is a safety issue. We can't have these kinds of venues if because it's unsafe for people. I mean, granted, 200 people can gather in a bar and drink to excess, and that's totally safe. But a bunch of teens standing around, like, and when I say a bunch, I mean like 17 teens standing around like 4 people playing guitars is dangerous. So,
Mar, how much did they want for the sprinkler system again?
$50,000.
Yeah, so
$50,000. So, a lot of the expenses for both of these venues came out of my pocket, about $10,000 both times, which took me some years to pay off. So in terms of like resources, it's really hard to consider doing that again.
I think one of the reasons that Vera has been continued to be successful is because the city finally did throw support behind it in terms of finances and a space where they wouldn't have to move over and over again. So project, which is in Seattle, which started out kind of like Northern and now is kind of a semi well-run, well-oiled machine, I'd say. I mean, it's still volunteer mostly, but
they have some paid staff.
Yeah.
But it's in the Seattle center, and the city of Seattle subsidizes their rent. So a lot of the people that are in the Seattle center are all nonprofits now. Like Folklife is there, and a few other theater and art groups are there, and they get a discounted rent from the city because the city owns that space. But again, like maybe after all of this settles down, we all realize how we want to spend our money, how we want to spend our time. I think that mutual aid is like sort of at an all-time high right now, where people are really wanting to contribute, not only to them, like to their neighbors in a way that we haven't seen before, but like to their communities, where we're seeing places like Rainy Day and Underhill Plants and all these like local businesses downtown struggling, and people really wanting to help support them in ways that maybe they wouldn't have 3 months ago. So maybe we'll all get a look at how we want our city and our community to be, and what we value. Maybe we take for granted things like Arts Walk, and like that we can go to shows. Like in Olympia, we can see art all the time. We have studio tour, we have Arts Walk, we have gallery openings, we have music shows. And what happens when that doesn't exist anymore? How much do we care about it? How much do we care about someplace like Arbutus? I mean, to me, it's huge, And so, we did this Northern thing sort of as like a project, but I was always surprised at how many people actually cared. Even if they never showed up, they cared. you know?
Yep.
So there's a few things in the comments. I think we may have hit most of them, but I just want to highlight them. Oh, it looks like Judy has a question.
Well, I have an observation that I'd like to make. I've been here about 40 years doing this, and what I observe is there may be a lifespan to a nonprofit activity that goes on. Those people eventually wear out, but the opposite of having the artists themselves do it is that I have observed in Tacoma that the Tacoma Arts Commission will do a studio tour, and they support it, and they give a lot of money to it, and it doesn't have the heart and the soul as when it's put together with a few human beings. And I know it's a lot of work, but give yourself a lot of credit, because when the big powers that be do it, it's very nice and it's financially supported and they have insurance, and something is lost. I really commend you guys for working so hard. And I look forward to the next project that you'll be inspired by. Thank you.
Elizabeth, you had a question? And folks, feel free to jump in. Also, if you've worked on it, feel free to jump in.
Hey, so I just had a comment, and I wanted to say I love your guys' passion for all ages music and spaces. I'm a huge advocate for all ages shows and stuff, so I love that you guys care so much. It's really cool to see other people with that same mindset. Yeah, it's outrageous that like all the flyers we see in Olympia nowadays are 21 plus shows, and you know, besides like Live Wears like before 10 p.m. shows, and we really do need more all ages spaces. And it's really sad to see, you know, what's going on right now. Every business is struggling, all the venues are struggling. It's just a really dark time we're living in, but it's really cool to see you guys with your love for all ages shows and music. That's super rad.
Elizabeth is a killer drummer. Killer.
Oh, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
Judy, to your comment about how nonprofits have a lifespan, I mean, when Northern closed, that's how I felt about it. Like, I kind of felt like, oh, we did our work and this work is never over, but maybe it's time for someone else to be in charge. It's time for someone else to do their thing. And we need to let someone else have the opportunity to do that. And I mean, now, you know, me and Kelsey are not under 21. So
Nowhere near.
Yeah. Kelsey's got a daughter that's over 21. So, you know, just to, you know, like part of me doesn't want to take up all the space for people who want to create that project, you know? I think it's important to like participate and do something, but also to give room to others so that there are many voices that can participate, so that it's not just one group or one person driving that ship all the time. So we'll see. I'm good at filling paperwork out, so, or at least I used to be, I don't know. So, you know, I'd be happy to lend that skill to somebody.
Rhett asked, challenges/solutions to garnering community support, seeing the value in prioritizing this type of space. I think that you all kind of covered that, but just wanted to shout that out. And then Susan just said, being sort of new to Olympia, I did not know what y'all have done for all ages music. Knowing this, I admire you even more, Mariella, ! You are amazing.
Thank you, Susan. One of the things that I can say, sort of talking about Rhett's point about garnering support, now I used to joke about it all the time, because after doing Northern and stuff, I used to get invited to all these art things in town. I sort of still do as the young person. I'm 45, so if that gives you any indication of where our city was at the time. But now, like me and Kelsey are sort of the grown-ups, so it is easier for us to garner support because we get taken a little bit more seriously.
I don't know if I do.
Maybe a little bit, because you know,
Maybe.
we participated in so many more projects, and we have all these like things on our resumes that sort of make us look legit, even if we're like the same people at heart. So that might be a resource for people in the future, or for us in the future to want to do something again, is that we look better on paper now than we did 15 years ago. I don't know, maybe.
I would love for somebody to pick up where we left off, or in a different place.
Mhm.
I'm wearing a Northern t-shirt, by the way. I don't know if you can see it. We
Yeah.
made these like on the spot during a party.
And this is,
Oh, I just saw red a second ago.
Will you show us again? Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to show you guys, I still own the original sign. I don't know, can you guys see that?
Yay.
Oh,
Did Dirk design that?
Yeah, well, sort of, yeah. It's like a riff on Dirk's handwriting. So when we moved into the new space, we had Brown and Balsley up here over on the east side make the sign that looks like that. So yeah.
I see Rhett. I see Rhett's face.
Hi, Kelsey. How are
Hi,
you?
Rhett. I'm good.
I like your background. That's nice. Looks good.
Oh yeah. Oh, I was like, what is the background? I forgot.
It looks like you're outside. I'm jealous.
Standing in front of Northern.
I need a backdrop in this garage that I'm in. You know, there's the public administrator in me that just wants to grill you on like program evaluation stuff like that. But you know, you guys did a lot of great work. Is there ways that like thinking about supports for somebody else wanting to get something like this started? Is there like here's something we didn't do that we should have done. Here's something that might have helped us in our overall process. So it wasn't just us doing the work or us funding the projects. Is there anything that you would sort of have there, like a bucket list that you would give somebody trying to start something like this?
I would say that one of the things that was really helpful to me was to not work from a model. Sometimes it's good to not care what came before you. So then you're not really concerned with doing it the right way or following in someone else's successful footsteps. We became friends with the people that work at the Vera, and they were able to give us a lot of their documents from their nonprofit, which was very helpful, because when we were putting together all of our like sort of legit nonprofit information, we took a lot of their mission, like worked from their mission and their goals to create ours, which was very helpful. It like sort of gave us the framework to like, or the framework to know where we wanted to start. So that was really useful. And when it came to like working with the city the first time and I applied for the permits, I just applied for the permits. And at some point later, they were like, you were trying to sneak this in. And I was like, by applying for a permit, I don't feel like that's sneaking. That's like following the steps. And so I wasn't nervous about just going for it. But to Dirk's point of like burnout, at first it was really just like when all the paperwork and all the like, you know, technical stuff and all the nonprofit and the setting up the tax ID, that I was just sort of like doing that on my own. And Dirk helped me with a lot of the like heavy lifting when we found a space and like was there for a lot of the shows. But it would have been, I didn't know how much work it was going to be. And So it would have been nice to like have, it would have been nice to know Kelsey at that time.
I came in later.
Yeah. You know, it would have been helpful to like have some other people to lean on at the time to sort of spread the work out, so that way, you know, I mean, and like, you know, Kelsey took up the mantle later, like after we moved into our new space. As you guys might have seen, I got pregnant when we were in our original space, and then I had a baby. And so like dealing with a lot of the volunteer stuff, I like passed that off to other people. And Kelsey like helped to coordinate a lot of like non-music events at the new space, which we really needed when the space was empty. So we had to like really cobble together a lot of ways to make money. In all the years that we did Northern, we never took out a bank loan. We did a Kickstarter. So we either earned our money or like I paid it out of my pocket. And so a lot of that was just like us, like, again, the DIY, like we're doing it ourselves. We're like working really hard, but like, you know, having more of a network would have been useful. And like, you know, in the 10 years, in the last, well, I guess 6 years, I've since served on a lot of nonprofit boards. And so now I know a lot more about fundraising. I wish I had like been a little bit more aware of like how to go about the process of fundraising and grant writing and knowing what money is out there and getting that sort of community support. But, you know, our audience was not people that had money. So we weren't really raising money from our audience, you know? And that was the difficult part, is that our programming and all the things that we were doing was for a bunch of people that didn't have any money. So we weren't going to be able to fundraise from them. And when we did, it was like $5 and $10, not the like $5,000, $10,000, you know? So
I'm picturing Vadi at the door being like, with her like arched eyebrow being like, it's pay what you can, $5 or more. She'd like emphasize the or more. She was so good at getting money out of people when we needed it. I would say a lesson is that maybe we could, I think if we could have afforded to pay somebody or pay Mariella, that might have been useful. And yeah, fundraising, like pursuing grants and things like that, that wasn't something we knew how to do. But maybe would do if we did it again. But it was fun.
So y'all, we're 1 minute away from noon. That was amazing to learn about. Anyone have any last comments to share or any last questions to ask as we wrap up?
I appreciate the space. I attended a lot of great underattended shows there. Appreciated that you guys did.
Me too. Yeah.
Thank you both so much, or thanks all of you for joining us.
Bye.
hi, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.